In a previous video we saw how to select the distro branch to study, based on the package manager. But which Linux distro could I suggest to a user who wants to start? First of all, a very important aspect must be clarified: each Linux distribution has its own update release cycle. There are stable versions, in which updates occur very slowly, but they guarantee a practically indestructible operating system. On the contrary, there are rolling release versions, those distributions whose updates are continuous. Finally, there is a middle ground between these distributions, the so-called semi-rolling, whose packages undergo a series of tests before being declared fairly stable, and therefore the updates take place cautiously. In this regard, we can analyze the distributions based on these three types of release, starting to talk about the most common distro branch, Debian. Debian is my favorite distro, since it is one of the most solid ever, so much so that it is used on servers. It is fairly easy to install, but a little more difficult to configure after installation. So it is suitable for slightly more advanced users. Debian is available in three development branches. 1. Stable, whose releases occur on average every 2 years. So the software is old enough. 2. Testing, which I use on my computer, and which contains fairly recent and stable software. 3. Unstable, also known as SID, whose packages are always new. This is the branch where developers fix bugs in software packages before carefully releasing them in Debian testing. On Debian it's based the 35% of all known Linux distributions. At the time I published this video, Distrowatch has 118 Debian-based derivatives still active. Excluding MX Linux, which currently dominates the Distrowatch ranking and which is the most indisputably easy to use thanks to its complete set of graphic tools that remove the user from the need to use the terminal, here are the two most user-friendly distributions from which, if you want, you can also learn something. Ubuntu is a distro based on Debian and more precisely on its most updated branches, testing for LTS and unstable for the standard releases. Ubuntu is available with various desktop environments, so the various Kubuntu, Xubuntu, Lubuntu, Ubuntu Studio and Ubuntu Mate are nothing but variants of the same release, which by default mounts the GNOME desktop environment. Once installed, Ubuntu is ready for use, and a new release is available every 6 months, in April and October. Ubuntu, since 2004, adding all its variants mentioned above, is still the Linux distribution most chosen by those who want to start. Linux Mint is the most famous derivative of Ubuntu. By default it allows the installation of proprietary drivers and includes repositories from which it is possible to install additional software such as Google Chrome, Google Heart, Flash Player, and Opera. Linux Mint is based on the LTS version of Ubuntu, but the new releases have not times constraints, so that developers can optimize the system more comfortably and better compared to mother Ubuntu. A Debian-based variant of Linux Mint is also available. To a user who wants to start, I suggest Linux Mint, thanks to its ease of use and above all the releases that seems to be more stable compared to Ubuntu. Now let's talk about the most famous and desired distribution for those who want always new software, Arch Linux. Arch Linux is a fairly young distribution, and its repositories are full of new software, always updated to the latest version. Being a rolling release, you don't need to reinstall everything from scratch, but you will have to constantly update packages at least once a week. The maintenance of this distribution is a little more advanced for a user. You can see this fact right from the installation, completely manual. Distrowatch has only 19 derivatives of Arch Linux still active, and many others, such as Anarchy, have discontinued support due to continuous updates, which make it difficult to maintain. The most famous and simple derivative, oriented to the user who wants to start using Linux, is Manjaro, which also includes additional repositories, maintained by its community, and which mainly serve to guarantee greater stability. The software from Manjaro's repositories reaches the end user after just 2 days, just in time to test for any conflicts that can lead to the distro breaking. Installing pure Arch Linux is the best solution if you want to get a more solid software. Anarchy Linux wins, because includes a minimal Debian-style installer, and therefore includes automated scripts for an installation easier. So as to begin to understand the essential steps of an installation, I personally suggest Anarchy Linux, for users who want an easier installation of a pure Arch Linux. And here, finally, a mix of strengths and updates, difficult to find in Linux, Gen 2. Gen 2 is a distro for truly expert users, as every single package must be compiled manually, starting from the kernel. In this way, each individual software installed will adapt perfectly to the machine on which it will be installed. But of course, for a user approaching Linux for the first time, something less frightening is needed than installing. Well, Gen 2 also has derivatives, and currently Distrowatch reports only 11 active. So Bayon is an Italian distro, which supports fewer architectures than Gen 2, but that's what you need if you want to get a solid and constantly updated operating system. So Bayon also includes its own package manager, to be used instead of Portage and never in parallel with it. During installation, So Bayon recognizes the necessary drivers. A stable version is released every year, but there is also a repository where you can download and test daily releases. But what if the user who wants to start needs to learn how to use Linux for Ubuntu? Here are Fedora and CentOS. Fedora obtains a stable release every 6 months, and all new software for Linux are tested on it, and in particular for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, that distro par excellence for commercial purposes. CentOS is the open-source version of Red Hat, so inside you will find software that is not really updated, but sufficient to guarantee an experience as close as possible to using Red Hat, with the additional possibility of using a desktop environment, which is a little difficult to see on an installed Red Hat server. Both CentOS and Fedora are extremely easy to install. Here, it should now be clearer for you to choose a Linux distribution. My personal experience has led me to prefer Debian testing, as it is a fairly stable and updated distribution, and it is a safe distro, as the developers obsessively test the precompiled deb packages before declaring them stable. There is a lot to configure after installation, but in the end you will get a clean, solid and lightweight operating system. Another distro that I like is Arch Linux. The constantly updated software can make the operating system susceptible to breakages, due to possible internal conflicts with the software already installed. With Arch Linux it is always wise, in that case, to use an LTS kernel and check every single package before any update. And then there is Anarchy, from whose installer you can get a clean version of Arch Linux, and without having to repeat the same commands and configurations every time. I hope this video has been useful to you. See you in the next video.